I'm recording this video at 2:50 p.m. on Monday, April the 6th. Not too long before or after Donald Trump finishes his little press conference trying to explain away his truth, calling for Iran to surrender and reopen the Strait of Hormuz or die. Here's a simple fact. Trump is losing the war, and Trump is feeling the pressure of losing the war. Trump has never been in a position where he lost anything outside the 2020 election. But losing the war in Iran is breaking him, mentally and physically. We see it on a daily basis. And to help me illustrate that point, I'm going to read you an article that was posted on Salon.com at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Iran is breaking Trump's spirit. The war is getting in the way of the president's race-baiting and revenge campaigns. Written by senior writer Amanda Malakoy. Donald Trump's address to the nation last week was supposed to be a big rah-rah moment. His chance to rally Americans behind his war on Iran. Instead, the president sounded like a whipped dog, barely able to summon the energy to make false promises about ending the war, quoting Trump very shortly. Thick layers of makeup were unable to make Trump come across as anything but a tired old man, even though the speech centered heavily on his two favorite topics, inflicting violence from afar and whining about how everyone misunderstands his unique genius. Seeing him in such a defeated posture came as no surprise. The president was having a no good, very bad week. On the morning of his speech, Trump had been to the Supreme Court in what appeared to be an elaborate effort to intimidate the justices into ruling in favor of his demand to end birthright citizenship. From the first few minutes of argument, it was already becoming that this far-right court doesn't seem ready to simply nullify the 14th Amendment. And a mere 13 minutes into the defense of birthright citizenship, Trump left in a huff. After his speech, in which he ricocheted between saying the war was nearly over and threatening to escalate America's attacks on Iran, oil prices rose. Even the investor class, which tends to be courageously optimistic towards Trump, is losing faith. The stock market is suffering. Firing Pam Bundy as Attorney General probably boosted Trump's mood temporarily. Other people's suffering seems to bring him to his happy zone. But even if he sacks more people, which is what he's partly considering, and I'm hoping that Whiskey Pete Hegseth and the Monty Burns wannabe Stephen Miller are on the top of that list, it won't save him from his decision to start a war in Iran that he's losing. There is no telling how bad the war and the economy will get, but one thing is starting to become clear. The war in Iran and the escalating economic damage from it is getting in the way of Trump's true love, which is waging culture wars to be sure, that stir up the ugliest impulses within the MAGA base. The president desperately wants everyone to stop talking about oil prices, bomb schools, the Strait of Hormuz, and get back to stoking racial hysteria and leading revenge campaigns against his perceived enemies. Trump's desperation to refocus his attention on his obsessions and grievances was on full display over the weekend. For nearly 2 days, the White House avoided press questions about a downed fighter jet, presumably shut down any discussions of the rescue mission that was underway. Instead, the president bellowed a few of his incoherent threats at Iran on Truth Social, but focused largely on his unusual obsession comparing about ABC and the New York Times posting misleading polls to convince himself he's popular and repeating white nationalist slogans about non-white immigrants. It was only after both Air Force servicemen that were recovered that Trump deigned to acknowledge the situation and, of course, to take credit for the rescue. Trump and his allies are working in tandem to redirect attention away from the war and onto their culture war fixations. On Wednesday, as the Supreme Court was hearing arguments about birthright citizenship, White House staffers and some of the most odious members of Congress fanned out on X, cheerleading for the justices to strip children born to immigrants of their citizenship. Deputy Chief of Staff, I mentioned him earlier, the Monty Burns wannabe, Stephen Miller, called the 14th Amendment, and I quote, the gravest and most preposterous of all the constitutional amendments, unquote. On Truth Social, Trump tailored the sentiment to his vocabulary level, calling the constitutional guarantee, quoting him, stupid. Senator Mike Lee, Republican of Utah, one of the most compulsive MAGA social media users in Congress, tweeted, and I quote, the Constitution isn't a national suicide pact, unquote. The following day, Trump kept whining after realizing the Supreme Court looks likely to rule against him, quoting his Truth Social Truth kangaroo court, along with a Fox News video claiming birthright citizenship is constitutionally wrong. Despite this, the administration's hyperbolic efforts to portray a 158-year-old amendment as an immediate threat to civilization itself, Trump and his allies could not turn media attention away from the very real disaster that is the Iran war. Thursday's headlines were dominated by the surge in oil prices that followed Trump's failure of a speech. It's not that the press ignored birthright citizenship, but most coverage outside of Fox News focused on how skeptical the justices were of the president's position. Trump reportedly fired Pam Bundy for similar culture war reasons. She failed to indict and imprison high-profile people who stood up to him in the past, including Senator Adam Schiff, New York Attorney General Letitia James, and former FBI Director James Comey. As this trio is often portrayed on Fox News as villains, Trump is not wrong that throwing them in jail would have been an exciting time for the MAGA base. But Bondi did her level best, opening investigations and trying to get charges filed, but she was stymied by a court system that still requires evidence and isn't keen on imprisoning innocent people, just because Trump wants to see it. Similarly, the White House and their backers have been trying and failing to turn the SAVE Act into a big deal. Despite bellowing many times and many threats at Republicans in Congress, Trump can't seem to get any real movement on a bill meant to disenfranchise millions of citizens from voting. But it's arguable that the bill is also falling short on this other purpose, which is likely even more important to the president: spreading panic over America's changing racial demographics. As Janelle Bozwi wrote last month in the New York Times, the bill isn't really about voter fraud, which is so rare as to be functionally non-existent. It's about the president pushing his beliefs that only legitimate citizens are a, quote, particular caste and class of American, defined by race, religion, and nationality, and united by their devotion to Trump, unquote. As the 2024 election showed, there are a lot of Americans receptive to the message that only white conservatives count as real Americans. But as a vehicle to hype them up, the SAVE Act doesn't seem to be doing much. As the What's Resonating newsletter shows day after day, even GOP social media barely pays attention to the bill. Recent Gallup polling illustrates that concerns about the so-called election fraud doesn't even rate a mention among Republican voters, listing their top concerns. The failure is not for a lack of effort from the White House and the propagandists. The usual suspects have developed the same overwrought language about civilization annihilation. Mike Lee even tweeted a meme picturing a hypothetical White House administration if California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom were to win the presidency. The implication was not so. Every person pictured below Newsom belonged to a racial or religious minority. Lee's post did not get a lot of engagement, but mostly because it appeared to be generated by artificial intelligence. Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett, her name on the post was wrong, and the meme used a picture of some random dude to stand in for New York City Mayor Zohran Mandawi. But the supposed dangers of letting people who aren't white Christian men hold power didn't seem to fire up the MAGA people Lee was trying to speak to. Even the provision added to the SAVE Act by its sponsors deprived trans people of medical care, a hot button topic on the right, failed to fire up the base about the legislation or to refocus media attention away from the Iran war onto the phony debate over Trump's false election fraud claims. This is bad news all around for Trump because as his approval ratings crater, even with the Republicans on the big ticket issues like the economy. A recent CNN poll shows that 64% of voters disapprove of the president's performance in office, up to 10 points from this time last year. Even among GOP-leaning voters, 32% admit that they disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy. His overall approval rating among Republicans have slipped, although it stands at a robust 80%. An analysis of the dates suggests that Republican voters are squelching concerns about the economy and the war in Iran because they want to see Trump as the man who punishes immigrants, women, racial minorities, and queer people. Because of this, Trump has a reason, however awful it may be, to keep his culture war exceptions front and center. The unbending loyalty of the MAGA base has always been his shield, protecting him from political collapse, even when everyone outside the 65% of Americans disapprove of his performance as president. As COVID-19 showed us, these people will go to great lengths, including refusing to protect themselves against a deadly virus if they feel it serves their larger cause of winning the culture war. But it seems that Trump's attention is fully pulled away from those paranoias and hatreds. He risks demoralizing them, especially since he's a rapidly aging lame duck. But by foolishly starting a war that is spiraling out of his control, his ability to redirect political and public attention to an issues that better serve his political ambitions seems to be crushed. Honestly, this whole situation has shown all of us that Donald Trump is desperate to get everyone's attention away from the Iranian war because he knows it's a disaster. He knows he shouldn't have attacked them, but he was so obsessed with distracting people not only from the Epstein files, but from his failing economy and his failing presidency and his failing bid to stay in power even after the midterms, and I only stress this enough, if the Democrats take the House and the Senate. But we're not going to ignore it, Trump. We're going to continue to talk about the Epstein files and this war you got us into. We're going to keep pressuring you and pushing you and your supporters to the point where they break and you break. Because the simplest fact, Trump, is that you are lame, or you're worse than a lame duck president. You're worse than a weak sister. You're a criminally weak sister. And the fact is, it's all coming to an end, one way or another. CTP, know the truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.